Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas. Coming up in this edition, race relations in the United States once again in the spotlight amid the unrest on the streets of Baltimore. Barack Obama pushes on with his long-promised immigration reforms. But the deportations continue. We report on the Mexicans sent back to a country they no longer call home. And 40 years after the end of the war, American GIs return to Vietnam in hope of redemption. But we start in the United States, where rioting in Baltimore has once again highlighted the tensions that exist between police and sections of the black community. The death of Freddie Gray from injuries sustained during his arrest sparked the anger this time round. His case recalling those of Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown, and leaving many agonising over the state of race relations in the country. France 24's Axel Simon and Aurore Chloé Dupuis take a look back at what's happened since Barack Obama was elected, amid so much hope of change.
3 White House representatives at Freddie Gray's funeral. Barack Obama picked Broderick Johnson to represent him, a man in charge of empowering young minority men. Obama, born of a Kenyan father and a white American mother, drew a lot of attention during his campaign, particularly in the black community. In March 2008, the candidate gave a striking speech on racial identity.
Anger is real. It is powerful. And to simply wish it away, to condemn it without understanding its roots, only serves to widen the chasm of misunderstanding that exists between the races.
Strong words from the future president, who didn't want to be seen as a symbol of a single community, but who spoke of a new post-racial era in America. But soon enough, racial tensions and incidents were all over the news. In 2012, in Florida, Trayvon Martin, a black unarmed teenager, was shot dead by a white neighborhood watch volunteer.
And when I think about this boy, I think about my own kids.
When judges acquitted the suspect a year later, President Obama spoke out again.
When Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Another way of saying that is Trayvon Martin could have been me 35 years ago.
In 2014, the Michael Brown case sent further shockwaves across the country. No charges were brought against the white police officer accused of killing Brown, a situation that triggered mass protests in Ferguson and beyond. 7 years after the election of the first African-American president, and more than 50 years after Martin Luther King's March on Washington, racial tensions seem far from being resolved.
Meanwhile, the US Supreme Court is deliberating whether or not the Constitution guarantees a right to same-sex marriage. Rulings due in June that's set to put an end to decades of controversy. And all this is already having an impact on the presidential campaign.
A festival-like atmosphere at the Supreme Court, with costumes, balloons and colourful flags under the spring sunshine. Hundreds of rights activists and anti-gay campaigners made the trip on Tuesday to hear the long-awaited debate. The last time America's highest federal court ruled on gay marriage was in June 2013, when it struck down the heart of the Defense of Marriage Act, allowing legally married same-sex couples to receive federal benefits. This time, the Supreme Court's decision could see gay marriage legalized nationwide. And the stakes are high, with the 2016 US presidential candidates having to put their own spin on the landmark case.
That a lot of people that are running for office right now or announced are trying to back away a little bit from some of these social issues, because I don't think that Republican candidates are going to be able to avoid the question and say, where do you stand on marriage? And they go, I don't know.
According to a human rights campaign poll, some 60% of Americans favor same-sex marriage, which is legal in 37 of the country's 50 states. For now, only 13 states, highlighted here in red, remain reluctant. And for the most part, the debate falls along partisan lines. Democratic presidential candidates support gay marriage, while Republicans oppose it. However, in a bid to court homosexual donors, some anti-gay senators are softening their stance.
Marriage is a question for the states, and it is wrong for the federal government or unelected judges to tear down the marriage laws of the states.
The speech didn't stop Senator Ted Cruz a few days later from taking a formal stand against same-sex marriage. But another presidential hopeful, Hillary Clinton, took an even further step. The former First Lady opposed gay marriage during her 2008 run for America's top job, but she's now supporting the act to increase her chances in a 2016 primary. A U-turn that could be used by other Republican candidates to highlight her inconsistencies.
Well, President Obama is still trying to pass immigration reforms he promised before his election. With the status of Latinos already proving a major issue in the current race to the White House, the deportations continue. Thousands of Mexicans who had lived for years in the United States on residence visas but who never gained citizenship are being expelled. In many cases, they're being sent back to a country they no longer consider home. Our team sent this report from Tijuana on the US-Mexico border.
Let me ask you, if you don't mind, how long have you been in business, sir?
On the phone, their manners are flawless, but most of them are gang members or former drug traffickers. They're Mexican, but for years, sometimes their whole life, they lived in the United States. In Tijuana's call centers, these deportees are highly sought after.
They all speak perfect English. They know the culture. They know the culture a lot more than they do their birth culture, which is Mexico.
Most of these employees only stay with the company for a couple of months. Almost all of them are trying to get back to the United States, legally or illegally. 5 years ago, Jesse was sent to a country he knew nothing about, his homeland. He left Mexico as a 4-year-old in his parents' arms and hadn't been back since.
When they first told me about deportation, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what? I mean, I just got out, I just went to the service. What are you talking about? I signed a dotted line saying that I was willing to risk my life. I put my life on the line. But what I believed then was I was a citizen of the United States. I was a permanent resident. I couldn't believe it.
Deported from the US for drug trafficking, Jesse has spent the last few years struggling to fit in here.
It's almost impossible to get a job if they see tattoos on you and they know that you're deported, because automatically you're a gang member. And in my case, it's a true case. I am a gang member.
Jesse has managed to rebuild his life on the other side of the wall, but for others, being deported was the start of a steep downward spiral. This place is called El Bordo, literally the edge.
This strip is all the drainage from all the wastewater from all of Tijuana. On this side we have the international diving line right here. Over there is where all the cars pass through the gates.
Police abuse is common here, and Jose Maria often comes down to collect witness statements.
Down under the bridge at like 3:30 in the morning.
They burn your houses?
Yes.
Like always.
Like always.
2,000 people live along the banks of this canal in extreme poverty. Drug use is rampant. Less than a kilometre away from the United States, these deportees have drifted into a life on the streets.
I got 7 times already trying to go back to the United States. I couldn't go back. I got stuck over here, and it's hard for me.
After 16 years in California, Sergio was deported for carrying a gun without a permit. He's lost contact with his wife and 3 kids.
I want to go back. I want to see my children. That's all I want. I don't want to be like this, some buildings. I want to clean up. I want to be clean, shave, and take a shower. This is scary night over here.
Deported from the United States and an outcast in Mexico, like thousands of other people, Sergio has been hit hard by the move. At the foot of the fence dividing the 2 countries, he holds out hope that someday he'll get back to California, where he'd built his life.
April the 30th marks 40 years since the end of the Vietnam War. The US's intervention there left permanent scars on both the Vietnamese population and ultimately on its own soldiers. Now some of those veterans are returning for the first time to the places they once fought in, many of them in search of redemption.
It was a living nightmare. What Washington thought would be a quick and easy war turned out to be a quagmire of guerrilla warfare. Many of the 2.5 million American soldiers who fought the Vietnam War suffered severe post-traumatic stress disorders for years afterwards. Richard Parker was one of them.
In many ways, the war made me crazy. When I left here in 1970, I was not a sane human being. So when I came back here, I just wanted to face my ghosts. I wanted to put to rest some of the things that were running around in my brain. Just let them rest.
4 years ago, Parker returned to Da Nang, where he served for the US Marine when he was 18. The trip was meant as a way for him to come to terms with his traumatic past. He fell in love with the country and now calls it home. Even though Vietnam is still run by a communist government, Washington and Hanoi have been forging strong ties since they normalized relations in 1995.
No two countries have come together further and faster than the United States and Vietnam.
However, the lethal legacy of the war continues to haunt the Vietnamese population. The country is still heavily contaminated with unexploded bombs. Agent Orange and napalm bombs that Americans used to flush out Viet Cong guerrillas out of the jungle affected civilians and future generations. Ahead of the anniversary of the fall of Ho Chi Minh, a group of US veterans visited Dong Ha that divided the North and the South. Some of the fiercest battles during the war took place in this region.
I've always thought it was a mistake that we were involved, and I've always been upset that we didn't do more to, once we withdrew, to remedy the long-lasting effects of the war.
The veterans visited some families in the region who've been affected by the chemical weapons.
The effect that the United States aggression has had on these people, it has really affected me deeply. I will go back to the States and I will do all I can to organize help.
Today, more than 15,000 victims of Agent Orange live in this region, including 5,000 children with birth defects.
Well, that's it for this edition. Thanks ever so much for joining us, and do stay tuned to France 24.